Okay. Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Transfer News Central podcast. I'm Jonny Bentley, your wonderfully charming host, and I'm joined by James Prescott once again. Hello, James.
Hi.
Good to be here. I know you're so happy to be here, and even more happy to be here for his debut on this podcast. Special guest from the Liverpool Echo, it's Mr. Matt Addison. How are you feeling, Matt?
Yeah, very good, thank you. We've been enjoying obviously some title celebrations and then a little sobering night last night as well. So it's been a strange week, some mixed emotions, but yeah, it's been unbelievable to cover, to be fair.
Well, it hasn't. I mean, this is obviously, if you hadn't realised, with Matt being the guest, and Matt just describing his emotions there, this is a very Liverpool-centred podcast, sort of looking at various elements of Liverpool's season and what it might look like going forward for the club. Because, of course, on June the 25th, Liverpool became Premier League champions after Chelsea toppled Man City 2-1 at Stamford Bridge. And Matt, you obviously mentioned the sobering moment yesterday, but I imagine you're still full of happiness at ending that horrible wait for a league title just so recently.
Yeah, 100%. It's a relief as much as anything. I think for Liverpool fans, it's sort of been one of those journeys where they've come so close on so many occasions and never quite got over the line. And then obviously the weird circumstances of this season following on from narrowly missing out last season. You wondered after 97 points last season, what might Liverpool do next? And obviously the next thing they did was win the Champions League and just not look back really ever since. So yeah, it's been a bizarre time really for all football fans this season. Obviously, coronavirus causing the 3 or so months delay. There was a time when null and void was on the table. There was still concerns over that. And I think a lot of Liverpool fans were probably looking at it and thinking, this is another one of those occasions where, we're narrowly going to miss out. And thankfully that wasn't the case. It wasn't on the table for too long for a variety of reasons, probably chiefly financial reasons that the Premier League was never going to be stopped. But yeah, I think Jurgen Klopp obviously made the same comments as well. And he said, there was a point where he was slightly concerned that it wasn't going to happen. But I don't think, whether you support Liverpool or not, I don't think you can really have any complaints that Liverpool have been the best team in the country this season by a long distance as well. And look, I wouldn't be surprised if, despite what happened last night, they go on and become record-breaking Premier League champions for a number of different reasons.
I mean, you mentioned null and void then, and we have a few mutual friends who were pushing for null and void. I'm sure they know who they are. But James, it was your team actually. You're a big Chelsea fan. It was your team that managed to get Liverpool over the line. In 2014, actually, you turned the title race on its head by beating Liverpool at Anfield 2-0. I'm sure Matt remembers that well. And it halted Liverpool's what appeared to be Liverpool's time then to lift the Premier League title and put Manchester City in the ascendancy, and they went on to win the league that season. So did you owe Liverpool a favour this time
around? Did Chelsea owe Liverpool a favour? I think if you speak to any Chelsea fan, I think the last thing any Chelsea fan wants to do is do Liverpool a favour. I think the Chelsea fans' perspective was Liverpool have won the league already. They're going to win it anyway. They're not winning it because we win tonight. We need to just win tonight to get into the Champions League. I think that was because I don't think many Chelsea fans could stomach the fact that we would give the title to Liverpool, to be honest. But I guess it can look like that because we really did enjoy stopping Liverpool winning the title in 2014, I've got to say. Chelsea fans still talk about that to this day.
Well, hopefully Liverpool fans won't be talking about that as much. Of course, because that was.
I mean, honestly, Liverpool have been fantastic this year. They have been. They play great football. They've been consistent. They've shown character. The team has been so well built by Jurgen Klopp. The way they put the team together, over a number of years, because they didn't have the finances of Manchester City, so they were strategic in who they brought in and what positions they brought in, and Jurgen Klopp has developed those players. He's built a spirit. He's brought in academy players as well. I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Joe Gomez, for example. He's he's built a team that is, that's just capable of winning every single game. And he's improved every player that in that squad. Every player has improved.
He absolutely has. Yeah, and I mean, we're going to sort of break it down, James, actually, into, how and why Liverpool won the league so convincingly. Again, a look at some of those disappointing elements, but also the progress going forward. And if we start really with how and why they won the league so convincingly, I'll throw this to both of you because it's quite a general question. So they amassed 97 points last year, but they didn't win the league. They missed out. Manchester City got 98. Do you think that the fact they missed out was a real source of inspiration this time around? Because that Manchester City team, they won the league amassing 100 points the season before. Then they got 98, 2 successive title wins. They tasted Premier League victory, the Premier League title twice over 2 successive years. Liverpool hadn't tasted that feeling yet. So do you think that they had that hunger and desire that Manchester City perhaps were lacking going at a third trophy in 3 years? Matt, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think part of it is definitely the hunger and desire. I think that hunger has been there right from the start, really, with Liverpool, not just because of the long wait, but, they've come so close. You think of all the cup finals that they got to under Jurgen Klopp and never quite got over that line. I suppose it comes back to the sort of mentality giants that Jurgen Klopp talks about. He talks about all the occasions. You think of the 4-0 win over Barcelona, for example, last season. I think things like that, they all play their part. And for Liverpool this season, it was all about momentum. I think right from day one, they were top of the league. I don't think they dropped off all the way through the season. They just kept winning and winning and winning. And I suppose, for a team, particularly for Liverpool, I think momentum is always key, because you sort of get that feeling with Liverpool fans whenever you go to Anfield, whenever there's fans inside the stadium. It's almost like riding a wave at certain times. And I think the fact that Liverpool started this season so strongly, City had a couple of dodgy results early on. There was a little bit of a gap. And then obviously in November, Liverpool beat Manchester City. It all sort of started from that point on. And I suppose, the motivation was the key thing to start that off. And I know for a fact that Jurgen Klopp said to his players at the start of this season, you can't aim for 85, 90 points. We have to aim for 100 points, because you have to presume that Manchester City and Pep Guardiola are going to get that, and we have to go one better. So, right from the start, they were clear about what they had to do. And okay, City are not going to get anywhere near the points that they got last season, but the fact that Liverpool aimed for that and sort of got off on the right track, I think was the perfect start that they needed then to continue the momentum. And okay, they went out of cup competitions and things like that, but as you say, the focus was purely on the league.
Yeah, I mean, did Pep Guardiola then set the barometer, James?
I think he did. I've been watching the documentary that was made about that season on Prime. I'm watching it again. They raised the bar very high that season. I mean, 100 points, points. And even when they won the league, Pep Guardiola was like, "No, I want to get 100 points. This isn't winning the title. Is not enough." And then the next year they got 98 points. So they've maintained that standard. That's the level that people need to get to now to win the league. And Liverpool rose to that challenge. I mean, they've got a lot of leaders in that team. They've got a lot of strong characters. They've got winners in that team. You need those kind of characters to win a league. It's not enough to have talented players. You need to have strong characters. And I think it's significant. There's 2 things about Manchester City this year. They lost Vincent Kompany, which is, I think, it's been hugely underestimated. He was colossus in terms of not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. He's a leader. He drove the team. He pushed the team. When he did play, he had a huge impact. And they didn't replace him. They didn't replace him not just as a defender, but also as a leader, as a character in the dressing room. They lost him, and that was significant. But also, it's also very hard to win 3 titles in a row. I think only Manchester United have won 3 league titles in a row in the last 30 years. I think. That's not even the great Chelsea side of Mourinho did it. Arsenal didn't win 2 in a row. and so it's very difficult to win 3 in a row
Mm.
because, and this is where the hunger Liverpool talk about come in because, and one of the reasons for that is because you've won it again and again and again. There's a little bit of, I mean, it's not that you don't stop having that champion mentality. It's just that to do it a third time, to push with the same energy again, is difficult. And when you've got a team like Liverpool, who is strong and as talented as they were, and motivated as they were, and had come off winning the Champions League, which had given them a huge boost of confidence and momentum because they'd actually won something together. I think the combination of that worked in Liverpool's favour because Liverpool had not won the title and they wanted it badly. And City were going for their third successive title. They lost Vincent Kompany and didn't replace him.
No.
And
lots of factors.
And they had injuries as well, to be fair. Laporte was out for a long time, and that was a big blow for Manchester City, especially when they'd lost Kompany already. And Liverpool were just relentless. You know, they just didn't let up. You know, and
I think
so often they got late goals. I mean, that's what champion teams get, late goals to win games. You know,
and I think that relentlessness, though, James, I feel like it's mimicked right from the top down. I call it like a top-down approach. I mean, Jurgen Klopp is Liverpool, isn't he? He's everything at the club. Absolutely. Everything revolves around him. And as I say, it's like a top-down managerial approach. And this is my little tick to get Burnley in there. I suppose you could say the same at Sean Dyche, me being a Burnley fan. Also has a similar level of authority at the club, and it has worked wonders. Please don't go, Sean. But also there's there's the similar structuring at Manchester City, who did so well 2 seasons ago. Pep Guardiola comes in after a slow initial season. There's no threat of the sack. I mean, I remember the first season he was in, and there was the threat they weren't even going to make Champions League, which was unprecedented for Manchester City. But you never got the sense he was going to get sacked. You never got the sense he was going to be moved on. This was a club that were fully invested in their manager, fully invested in their long-term project. Look at them now. I mean, they're doing wonderfully well, just like Liverpool. Would you say, Matt, that it's important? How important is it to have a manager being the complete focus of a football club if it's going to succeed in the long term?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we've sort of seen both sides of that. I think certainly, as you say, Pep Guardiola has that at Manchester City. I think Manchester City, for probably 5-10 years before they got Guardiola, were gearing up for the time when they were going to get him. I suppose with Liverpool, it's slightly similar in that, you know, every single facet of Liverpool Football Club has Jurgen Klopp's fingerprints on it. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Every single academy player, he's across. He knows everything about everyone. He's, you know, friendly with, you know, even the little things like the dinner ladies at Melwood. He'll know them by name, and he'll, you know, have that sort of relationship with everybody. And I suppose it all comes back to the sort of character that he is. I don't suppose if somebody else without that charisma and without the quality of, you know, the skill set that he has as a manager, I'm not sure whether it would work in the same way. So
are you thinking of any names when you say that, for example?
Not particularly at Liverpool, to be honest. I just think it's sort of it's that tying together, isn't it, of being a world-class manager and also having the social side of it as well. So, you know, for somebody to come in and have such an impact on such a big football club, I think you have to almost be almost like a unique sort of character and person. And I think certainly Jurgen Klopp has that. And I suppose the other thing that you've got to say is that he had a similar sort of setup in terms of working under a sporting director, in terms of, you know, not having the greatest power over transfers, in terms of the sort of support that he had with the fans. He had a similar sort of situation at Borussia Dortmund as well. And I suppose there are sort of parallels to draw between those two clubs. I think it was pretty much exactly the same there, whereby everything was sort of done at Jurgen Klopp's word in the way that he wanted it. I suppose it's similar at Liverpool, and it was almost like a dress rehearsal for one job compared to the other. And, you know, I suppose from what I've read and what I believe, the similar sort of situation happened at Mainz as well. So he's always had that throughout his career. And I think the sort of unique skill that he has is that he's able to almost delegate the stuff that he knows he can't do particularly well to other people. So he has the best staff around him. He brought in Mona Nemmer, the nutritionist from Bayern Munich, and she's sort of world renowned for being the best at the nutrition and the food side of things. And it's all those marginal gains. Even if it's just one person being brought in to do a certain thing, he knew that was the best fit for the football club. And when you add up all of those things, that I think is what makes Liverpool Football Club now. Because as James said before, Liverpool don't have the money of Manchester City. You've got to then find another way of winning. And for Jurgen Klopp and for Liverpool, I suppose it's up to him to try and tie all of those bits together.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned actually Liverpool don't have the money of Manchester City, and some people will say, but they signed Van Dijk and Alisson. However, obviously that's through the Coutinho transfer money, wasn't it? Really, that funded those two moves. And you're absolutely spot on with your comments there. And also, James, it's quite handy to have you on again with a quick reference back to Chelsea. We talk about managers being at the centre of a football club. And it seems like that's happening at Chelsea now, but in the past, I mean, they had every man and the dog as manager of Chelsea, didn't they? And it seemed like even if you didn't hit the ground running or you had a season where it was a bit iffy, the manager's gone. And Roman Abramovich was the centre of the football club. In many ways, he still is. But there seems to be an emphasis now on maybe Frank Lampard having a bit more authority than maybe other managers had in the past. Yeah,
I think that's true. They've completely restructured the club, Chelsea. And actually, it's funny, the transfer of Timo Werner actually highlighted this, that Peter Cech and Frank Lampard are very powerful at that football club now. They're kind of directing the football direction of the club. The club are backing Frank Lampard's targets. Peter Cech is advising on targets as well. They're the ones that are doing negotiations with players instead to persuade them to join the club, instead of the person who's doing it before, who isn't a football person. Marina Granovskaya isn't a football person. And that she's a good saying that they're joining Chelsea because of Frank Lampard. And that's and it looks like they've got from what I've heard, a 3-year plan to build a team to have sustainable success, winning league titles and Champions Leagues. And this has been the first year where you have a core of academy players, and you develop those and you see which ones are good enough. You see what you've got, and then you bring in players that will improve you in places you need to improve this summer and next summer, and then you're ready to go for the title. I think that's and I think they've modelled a lot of that on Liverpool. I really do. I see a lot of similarities to how they've started to restructure things as to what Liverpool have done.
In 10 seconds, James, do you prefer this idea of building like Liverpool, or do you prefer the in and out structure of win some trophies, have a bad season, win some trophies, have a bad season, bye.
I definitely prefer the Liverpool model because it's sustainable.
Yeah,
it allows you to dominate over a number of years rather than have one season on, one season off.
Yeah, for sure.
Financially as well.
Yeah, you just got into 10 seconds. Well done. So is there... do you think, Matt, is there a player at Liverpool? And I sort of think, well, I've got my own opinions, but I won't say for now. But is there a player at Liverpool who is simply irreplaceable? Or is the collective unit simply too strong to collapse if any single one player was to leave the club? What I mean is, if a player does leave, I'm not saying they can just carry on as normal, but if they left, could they get a replacement in and for it to continue like the status quo that they're doing now? Is that collective unit too strong for one player to make a substantial difference, if you like?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think that the sort of sum of Liverpool's parts is greater than the individual players, but I do think there are two players that Liverpool would find incredibly difficult to replace. I think one of them is Virgil van Dijk, just because he is so much better than pretty much every other defender in world football. I think he is the one who has pretty much improved the entirety of the back line. I think Joe Gomez is a fantastic, potentially world-class centre-back of the future. I know he didn't show that last night, I accept that. But, going forward, I think he can be absolutely superb. But I think, playing alongside Van Dijk has, just taken him really to a complete new level. So I think for Liverpool to go and find another Van Dijk would be incredibly, incredibly difficult. But the other one that I would say is Alisson as well. I think, again, for me, the best goalkeeper in the world. I know there's 2 or 3 out there, Edison being one of them, who are fantastic. But I think, again, in the same way that Van Dijk transformed Liverpool, I think Alisson obviously did, and that's kind of accentuated by the fact that Loris Karius and Simon Mignolet had come before him. But even so, I think whoever he'd have replaced, you would have seen a significant improvement, because the whole Liverpool team can play 10, 15 yards further up the pitch. There's just a whole lot of security, even on things like counter-attacks. 9 times out of 10, he'll get the ball and he knows exactly what to do. He's thinking 5, 6 steps ahead. And if he bowls the ball out to Andy Robertson, to Trent Alexander-Arnold, that there's a threat there instantly. I think it would be very difficult to sort of find a goalkeeper who was as exceptional as he is at making saves and doing that sort of thing, but being equally as brilliant on the ball and almost as part of the attack, which, for a goalkeeper sounds ridiculous, but I suppose that is the modern game. So, yeah, look, you could go through the team and say, he's the best in the world at his position. Their numbers are world class. You look at Mohamed Salah, the number of goals that he gets. But I think the two that I would pick out would be Van Dijk and Alisson, just because they are, for me, so much better than the rest of the competition.
No, I think you made a perfect summary there. I mean, for me, Alisson is the best in the world for the reasons you said, not just a brilliant shot stopper, but his distribution's also on another level. I'd say Henderson's distribution slightly better, in fairness, but I think Alisson as an overall goalkeeper is a better goalkeeper, I think, than Henderson. Although with Van Dijk, I think you missed the point that actually, if Van Dijk was to leave, the best defender in the world, self-proclaimed Dejan Lovren, would come in and obviously fill that void. So I don't know. I think maybe you missed the point there. But I kind of agree, really, because with Salah and Mane, I think they get phenomenal numbers. I always think, though, with Salah and Mane, they miss almost. I mean, Salah in particular misses almost as many as he scores, and a phenomenal player for getting into those positions. But I'll throw this to you, I suppose, Jane. If, for example, Barcelona or someone said, right, we're going to pay £140 million for Mo Salah, I think, and he's a phenomenal player, one of the best wingers in the world. But whereas with what Matt alluded to there, with Alisson and Van Dijk being basically the best in their position in the world, to me, I think if someone paid Liverpool that money and Liverpool said, right, we're going to sign Jadon Sancho and replace him, I don't think the effect would be quite as big as people think.
No, I don't. I absolutely agree with what Matt said. I mean, Virgil van Dijk and Alisson are two irreplaceable. I mean, like, Alisson is the best goalkeeper in the world. Virgil van Dijk is probably the best centre back in the world. Those two signings for what turned Liverpool from a really entertaining attacking side to title contenders. And there's this quote I've seen from Sir Alex Ferguson, of all people. Attacks win you games, defences win you titles. And as soon as Liverpool signed Virgil van Dijk and Alisson, you knew that that's what made them into title contenders. Before that, they had Sadio Mane and Firmino and Salah before that, and they weren't winning anything. They hadn't won anything. They weren't title contenders. But as soon as they brought those two in, they became title contenders. That was absolutely key to that happening. So, and you could replace Salah. You could, if you got 140 million for him, you could go out and buy Jadon Sancho or someone else. But you couldn't replace Virgil van Dijk. I can't think. I mean, obviously, I suppose you could go for Koulibaly or whatever, but they're not as good. He's not as good. I mean, he's not as good.
He's very good, by the way.
He's very good, but he's not as good as Virgil van Dijk.
No.
And Alisson, the type of goalkeeper that he is, and how good he is with the distribution, as well as being a great shot stopper and keeper, you probably couldn't replace him. So you could buy another top goalkeeper, but it wouldn't have the complete game that Alisson has.
You'd have trouble replacing either.
Sorry?
Yeah, you'd have trouble replacing either, I think, is the general consensus.
It'd be very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, we look at Liverpool as well over the season. There's a few key games that they've had, and I've made a note of a few here, that were sort of crucial, really, in the title win. We've got one early on in the season, Southampton 1, Liverpool 2. I think it was the second Premier League game of the season because Adrian, who was in goal, they were 2-0 up, weren't they, Liverpool at the time, Mane and Firmino. Adrian having a solid game and then passed the ball straight to Danny Ings, or knocked the ball straight to Danny Ings. But I think, they still managed, and I think Ings missed a good chance at the end, but that was a good sign, really, of Liverpool showing character, because Liverpool of old, you know, after the Adrian mistake, you could have conceivably seen them drawing that game or dropping points. But it, you know, phenomenal character, I think, already so early on to grind out the victory almost. And it's a pattern we saw throughout the season, because here I've got Chelsea 1, Liverpool 2 at Stamford Bridge, and Liverpool weren't good in that game. They went 2-0 up. Kante pulled the goal back and they ground that one out. Spurs 0, Liverpool 1. Firmino goal. Again, a ground out. It wasn't a pretty victory. You know, there was a lot of the games I got down. Liverpool 2, Bournemouth 1. You know, you think, you know, I'm surprised Liverpool weren't winning this game 3-4, considering who they were playing. But how important is grit and sort of having that know-how and having that game management? How important has that been over the course of this season?
It's been huge. I mean, it's the same for every single winner of the title. I think there's a few games every single season where you go, that was a moment where you thought, you know, that was the sort of key game, or that was a turning point, or things like that. And I mean, the one that sort of stands out in terms of the mentality for me is Aston Villa. Liverpool were 1-0 down to Aston Villa for 60, 70 minutes and turned it round. And in the end, they won it in the last minute. You know, as you say, Liverpool of old wouldn't have done that. And I suppose you wonder where that mentality has come from. I can only think it's come from Jurgen Klopp and from the sort of team spirit that he's generated, because the players that Liverpool have brought in haven't necessarily been winners when they've arrived. You think of Virgil van Dijk, okay, you know, he won titles with Celtic, but that's not really the same. You think of Andy Robertson, he got relegated with Hull. Wijnaldum, you know, again, he's an excellent player, but got relegated with Newcastle. You wonder where and how that sort of happened, that they got themselves into that situation and managed to sort of foster that environment where every single player is sort of got that spot on. And I suppose it sort of comes back to the way that Liverpool recruit. They don't just recruit on how much they could add in terms of the player, how much of a skill set they have, or how suitable they are to fitting into the team. It's also, you know, looking into the background checks, looking into, you know, how will this player fit in with the group that we have. I think Liverpool are certainly the most advanced in terms of the data when they look at signings and things like that. But they also do a lot of personal background checks. They'll speak to people who, I don't know, played with Sadio Mane 10 years ago or whatever, and sort of ask about, you know, the way in which they perform, the way in which they train, the way they live their life, that sort of thing. So it's almost like you don't just have to find the perfect player, you have to find the perfect professional and the perfect person as well. And when you combine that with the likes of Jordan Henderson, with James Milner, who's obviously been there and done it for Manchester City, for England, for teams like that, I think what Liverpool have done is they've almost got it perfect in the transfer market, not just from a footballing sense, but from the whole sort of perspective of these characters coming in. You know that they're going to gel, and they've only really got Loris Karius wrong since Jurgen Klopp arrived, and he cost, 4.7 million? You know, the rest of them have been absolutely spot on, and I suppose you have to get that perfection if you're going to overcome teams like Manchester United, Manchester City, who can just spend whatever they want every single summer.
Yeah, I mean, that is spot on. I mean, just a word as well, just to sort of push on a little bit on, you were talking about sort of having the right characters, and I think in midfield, often, you know, midfield help win titles, and maybe Liverpool's are a bit more understated than, say, Manchester City's. But Fabinho and Henderson, I think, are two really that offer, I'd say, no thrills necessarily, but no spills. I mean, the two players that are, workmanlike, dogged, determined. But they've been crucial, really, haven't they? Key moments this season. I mean, even Fabinho coming up with some swazzy finishes from 35 yards. I mean, you know, two really good players who maybe, I suppose Henderson's in with a look of the Player of the Year, actually, but maybe without the numbers necessarily to back it up. But as you said, those two would have been key to the successes this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to be careful sometimes and not compare Liverpool's midfield too much to Manchester City, because yes, you know, Jordan Henderson isn't Kevin De Bruyne, and he never will be, but he's still an unbelievably good, much more technically gifted, I think, as a footballer than the vast majority of
I thought you were going to say that Kevin De Bruyne for a second.
No.
No.
Look, Kevin De Bruyne is the best midfielder in the world for me at the moment.
Agreed.
But I still think Jordan Henderson would get into a lot more teams than what some people realise. And I suppose the sort of stereotypical version of Jordan Henderson is long gone, but certainly Fabinho as well. Some of the passes that he's produced, some of the way that he ties Liverpool's midfield together, he's been unbelievably good. And the Manchester City game, I mentioned it before, back in November, it was his goal, I think, that started all of that off. I think that was the opener in that game. He's been absolutely crucial, and I think we're going to go on to talk about the Champions League and Atletico Madrid later in the podcast. And I think it was telling that Fabinho, possibly his worst game of this season, came against Atletico, and Liverpool ended up losing. So I suppose, as I say, you've got to be careful not to do Liverpool's midfield down too much, I think, because they are probably, if not world class, then on the verge of being world class. But maybe not quite as good as Manchester City.
No, I mean, James, you could only dream, couldn't you, to have a player like Kevin De Bruyne at Chelsea, and as Matt said, the best midfielder in the world. If you had him, you'd never sell him, would you? Though, never sell him.
No, I'd never sell him. No, I'd only sell him if I'm called Jose Mourinho and every player has to defend. And
Don Bele might be
going to a left back, and there's a lot of yes. Yes, I know that still basically rubs up every Chelsea fan the wrong way that Mourinho sold De Bruyne. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
Hey, but Oscar was good, wasn't he?
Who?
Oscar was good, wasn't he? While he under Mourinho.
Don't. It's just. It's too depressing. We had a great team back then that we sold basically half of them. It's ridiculous. Anyway, yes. Kevin De Bruyne is the best midfielder in the world. Yes. Yeah. He's just world class. He's in contention for Player of the Year, even though he's not won the title. That's he's just incredible. But like Jordan Henderson, you were talking about him. To me, that's a great example of how Jurgen Klopp can improve players. He wasn't the player that he is now when Jurgen Klopp turned up at Liverpool. Jurgen Klopp has turned him into a really great midfield player, and he's what, like I said before, he's what every title-winning team needs. He's a leader. He drives that team on. He organises. He shouts at people on the pitch. He drives them forward. He doesn't let them give up. He's good in the dressing room. You need players like that to win titles. That again, it's winning the league titles is not just about ability. It's about character. It's about mindset. It's about that's absolutely key. If you don't have that, you can't win. You can't win league titles or Champions League because there's lots of talented teams in the world. Especially in this league, there's a lot of talented teams. So, those two very different kinds of players, and I think everyone would admit Kevin De Bruyne is the best midfielder in the world, without a doubt. And Manchester City's midfield is one of the best midfields in the world, without a doubt. Liverpool, Fabinho is absolutely brilliant with them. Like every team needs a good player in that position to win a title.
Battering ram.
Someone who sits in front of the back four and will just stop the threats, get in position, have the football intelligence and the pace and the physicality to get into the right positions and make the tackles and start attacks. That's what a good defensive midfielder does. And every title-winning team has one. You're spot on. With Henderson as well, just to go back to Henderson, I think he's the only England midfielder who's guaranteed to play in England's midfield so far. Anyway, I think he's the only one who's a shoo-in. Yeah.
You've got Foden, Grealish, Rice. I think Trent Alexander-Arnold in the future, but where that goes, I'm not sure. We'll talk about that slightly later on as well. But what I want to go on to is some slight negatives maybe for the season. Obviously, Liverpool done fantastically well in the Premier League, won the Club World Cup, which was unfortunately sort of knocked them out of the Carabao Cup, which I felt a bit sorry for the club with, to be honest. Would have been they put them in a bit of a difficult situation. But obviously also out of the FA Cup and the Champions League. Matt, you mentioned the 3-2 Atletico result, which was a surprise. You know, I certainly expected Liverpool to beat Atletico at Anfield, but I did think that if there was a team that maybe could take on Liverpool at Anfield and get a result, I think I even said this to you, James, on the pod way back when.
Yeah.
It could be, what can I say? I'm like Paul the Octopus from the World Cup. But you said, I thought that maybe Atletico could do that because they're a horrible team to play against, very much reminiscent of my own team, actually, in the sense that they sit back, they try not to use the housery word because that's not a very nice word. They just annoy the hell out of the opposition, and they might find a way to grind out results. Also, probably, if Alisson's not the best in the world in goal, if Atletico have Oblak, who could be considered the best in the world.
I think, yeah, he's up there, yeah.
Yeah. But how frustrating was that, Matt, to, Liverpool, smashing the league, just, at that point, I think if we knew if the league carried on, they'd win comfortably. Was it a case, are you frustrated, or would you say, you as a Liverpool fan at the start of the season, would you have preferred the sole Premier League title? I know what the answer is. A sole Premier League title or the Champions League, the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup? Which one would you take?
100% it's the league title, because obviously I think for most clubs you'd pick the Champions League over the Premier League. I think that probably is the case maybe for Chelsea, certainly for Manchester City, for teams like that who maybe haven't won it as often. But for Liverpool, it was all about the league title this season, not least because they'd won the Champions League last season. So, without wanting to be too blasé about it, they've kind of been there and done that. Jurgen Klopp had achieved that. It was about ticking the next thing off on the list, which obviously was the Premier League. And that was the thing that was going to make this Liverpool team, Liverpool legends, that was the sort of difference for them. We've seen, obviously, in previous years what's happened, and they've come close and not quite managed it. So that was, the huge thing. But in terms of the Atletico Madrid game, I think, obviously, as you say, it was a shock. But I do think Atletico were almost the worst case scenario draw for Liverpool, because, as you say, the way that they play, they defend very deep. Liverpool historically under Jurgen Klopp have struggled against teams like Burnley or Stoke when they were in the division, teams that just would sit back and not really make any attempt to attack, and Liverpool would struggle to break them down. Now, okay, over the last couple of seasons, Liverpool have got much better at that. They've managed to get their fullbacks almost like number 10s now. The number 10s for Liverpool play on each side of the defence, don't they? So Liverpool have come up with creative solutions. Even though they've lost Philippe Coutinho, they've managed to sort of break down these defensive teams. And I think obviously the record this season, they've won 28 out of 32 matches, something like that. They've obviously found a way to get past those teams. But Atletico Madrid are that style of team, but they're the very, very best at that style in the world. They do it incredibly well, and it's something that Diego Simeone has sort of managed to get his own fans on board with as well. I think for a lot of teams, if you tried to play that way and you're Real Madrid or you're Manchester United or you're Liverpool, I don't think you can really do that. But with Atletico Madrid, it's sort of part of their identity, and they revel in that sort of thing. Diego Costa, Diego Godin, over the years, players like that have sort of basically cultured or fostered a culture whereby that is acceptable. And I think they almost perfected that against Liverpool. And Liverpool did have one or two chances, but as you say, Mo Salah doesn't always take those chances. And I suppose that was the difference really on the night, that Marcos Llorente managed to score and Mo Salah didn't. So yeah, it was frustrating, but I suppose at that stage, Liverpool knew they were going to be Premier League champions. And also now in hindsight, the Champions League has been completely messed up anyway. It's going to be a really bizarre year for the Champions League. So Liverpool almost did it the right way round, didn't they? They won the Champions League when it was a normal season, and then they've won the Premier League by a record margin this. So look, I don't think too many Liverpool fans can complain.
Yeah, so as you say, Liverpool deliberately got themselves knocked out of the Champions League. But I think we're talking about necessarily managers that, as we say, embody the club. And you were right there, Matt, to touch on the philosophy and the makeup of Atletico. Very much in line with Diego Simeone as well, a bulldog. I mean, Diego Simeone reminds me a bit of Antonio Conte, He runs as much as his players on the touchline. He's an absolute madman, like a Rottweiler if he was a dog. And he just, he gets his team so up for it in many ways. And yeah, to me, I saw there might have been a bit of a shock on the cards, and inevitably there was. But one person who came in for a lot of criticism in that game, it wasn't necessarily Fabinho who underperformed. It was actually Adrian, who did inevitably, I think 2 of the goals he probably could have saved had Alisson been in goal. But there were immediately calls, I remember at the time, obviously emotionally, people are angry just after the game. They say, get rid of Adrian, he's terrible, he's this, he's that. The thing is, James, I mean, when you come to a second choice goalkeeper at a big club, in my head, it's not always the rule, but generally, give or take a few examples, I feel like the second choice at a big club is a goalkeeper who isn't necessarily good enough to be a number 1 at a smaller Premier League club, but given the odd game or so, he can come in and do a job, and you wouldn't miss him too much for the odd game. It's not Adrian's fault, is it, that he was thrown in against Atletico Madrid at Anfield, in such a big game. And even though he did wilt a little bit, he wasn't brought in for that, was he? He was brought in to play. I mean, at the start of the season, he played quite a few games, and after a shaky start, he played quite well. So, do you think? I mean, what do you make of the number 2 goalkeepers, James? Do you agree with some fans that he should be gone and they should look to invest in a better goalkeeper? Or do you think, whoa, hang on, Alisson's going to be playing all the games near enough if he's fit? You've got to have a bit of perspective.
It's a difficult one because the top goalkeepers cost a lot of money, and generally for most games you want to have the same goalkeeper. You don't want, there's not much rotation that goes on with goalkeepers. But certainly not in the Champions League and the Premier League. So unless a goalkeeper is injured or suspended, number 1 will probably play most of the league games or the Champions League games, right? So a number 2 isn't going to play that many games. They're going to probably play the cup games. They might play league games, which don't matter at the end of the season if you've won the league or your position is secure or whatever. But they won't play that many games. So it's difficult to get a player, firstly, who's willing to do that, who is good enough to start. That's the first thing. The second thing is the financial cost of it. If you want to buy a player who can start, that's going to cost you a bit of money and wages as well. So, and especially right now, clubs can't really afford to do that. So you need to have healthy competition, but the healthy competition can't be. He's never going to be as good as the number 1 generally, because of those factors. And I think Adrian's done a pretty good job as number 2 this year. Generally, of course, he's made mistakes, but he's not the number 1 keeper, is he? So it's not like the number 1 keeper is screwing up every game and he's come in and be a number 1. He's doing what a number 2 has to do. And I mean, if Alisson got a long-term injury and was out for a season, then you think, okay, get a slightly better keeper in who can be the number 1 for a season while he recovers. Yes, that's a different scenario, but that doesn't generally happen. So I think Adrian's done a very good job as a number 2. I think I don't think there's any reason they need to change that, especially because Liverpool's financial position isn't the best at the moment. I mean, they could, they're not, because of what they're impacted by COVID, like a lot of clubs. So if they're going to invest in the market this summer, I don't think a number 2 keeper should be their priority.
No,
there's other areas they need to just strengthen and get a bit more depth.
Well, like I say, sort of, you look at, say, Claudio Bravo, 38 at Manchester City, does a job if Edison's not plays in some of the cup competitions, as we say. But you couldn't imagine Claudio Bravo, I don't know, going to, say, Watford or something and suddenly, ousting Ben Foster. He's sort of there because he's, in the twilight of his career, and he can still do a job in the odd game. And obviously, Adrian came to Liverpool, second choice West Ham goalkeeper, was released. Obviously good opportunity. I at the time thought it was a genius bit of business, really. He's, Premier League experience, free transfer, seems like a really nice character, a good guy, as Matt said, character is important in this. But I do remember at the time, as I say, there were so many Adrian outs, in a similar way to, I suppose, when Loris Karius made a mistake in the Champions League. I mean, to me, I don't think Karius would be a bad number 2 option. you know. But has that ship sailed almost, given what he's cost Liverpool in the past?
Yeah, the ties are 100% are cut there. I think the damage has been done there. I don't think he's got any future. To be honest, I feel really, really sorry for him, because I don't think he's got a future in England at all now, because people, you know, every week they would just remind him of what had happened. And, you know, it was a horrible thing to happen to anyone. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But yeah, we've seen him make mistakes in Turkey now, where he's been out on loan at Besiktas for 2 years, and I don't think his confidence has ever recovered. He is still young for a goalkeeper. I think he's still only 26, so he's still got, you know, a long time ahead of him in the game. But I'd be very, very surprised if that was at Liverpool. I mean, just to go back to Adrian for a second, I think Liverpool have been really unlucky this season. I think for a large part of this season, the narrative has kind of been that Liverpool have been lucky. They've not had injuries. They've not, you know, had players missing. But I mean, Alisson has missed, I think, 9 Premier League matches, and it's sort of covered up a little bit by the fact that he's, I think, second only to Burnley's Nick Pope in terms of the Golden Glove and that sort of thing. You do kind of forget how much of this season he's been missing. And, you know, when Liverpool brought Adrian in, they might have thought, you know, that he'd play maybe 3 or 4 matches at the most in the Premier League. He might get the Carabao Cup, he might get the FA Cup, but what he's actually ended up doing is playing a crucial part in the Super Cup. He saved penalties and won Liverpool that against Chelsea. He's played obviously in the league and done okay. He didn't keep a vast majority of clean sheets in the games that he played, but, you know, Liverpool, even with his error against Southampton, as you mentioned, Liverpool still won with him in goal. They kept a 100% record for the first few matches of the season with him in goal. You know, he's played many, many more matches than anyone would ever expect. And I don't think next season he'll play anywhere near as much. So the suggestion that Liverpool would need to upgrade the second choice goalkeeper, I don't think really makes too much sense. Partly because he's decent enough as it is, but partly because, you know, Alisson's going to play a lot more, we assume, next season, because he's not going to have a 3 or 4 month injury followed by a red card, followed by another injury. So, you know, it would be very unlucky for Liverpool to have that situation ever again, really.
No, you're absolutely spot on. And actually, you know, I agree. I just remember at the time there was a lot of hysteria surrounding him, and I think understandably so, given what the size of the match. But again, I always thought that was quite harsh. And like you said, I think he's largely done pretty well. I mean, people said, "Oh, I don't trust him with the ball at his feet." I remember when Simon Mignolet used to have the ball at his feet. He used to be like, James, can you remember you might remember this in the old Batman and Robin film, where Batman's trying to get rid of the bomb and he's running around and he can't get rid of the bomb, and then he throws it into the river, and then I was like Mignolet when Mignolet had the ball at his feet. Honestly, you just didn't know what would happen. It was just absolutely crazy. Anyway, so on to sustainable future, kind of, if you will, and looking forward. We've got, you know, Matt, you're very familiar with the academy, and Liverpool are notoriously now quite stingy with the spending, obviously because they can't afford it in the same respects as Manchester City. But a few I've picked out here. Well, Nico Williams has been coming on recently and looks the part, really, does look quite good. Kijana Hova, I hope that's pronounced correctly, also does look quite good in centre-back. Lesser seen Yasser Larouki at left-back, but sort of a silent understudy to Robertson, but we've seen less of him. Curtis Jones with the winner in the FA Cup against Everton, and Harvey Elliott, who can play at right wing as well. They're Sepp Vandenberg, that's 6 potential people who have been on the fringes of the first team. Do you see the youthful players at Liverpool as a way of bridging maybe the financial gap that they have with Manchester City, as a way of adding to squad depth and maybe seeing, you know, the likes of Williams pushing, as we see now, AlexanderArnold. Obviously, it's not in the same breadth of AlexanderArnold, but he was also a youngster once who was coming through. Do you see similar pathways through for some of these guys to be making, maybe with the, you know, as the season comes to an end, Liverpool have won the title, maybe making some late substitute appearances, boosting experiences?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's certainly you picked out three there that I think will go on and play a significant number of minutes for Liverpool. I think Nico Williams is one of those, Harvey Elliott and Curtis Jones. I think those three, I think I'm right in saying they all need to make 3 more appearances before the end of this season to guarantee themselves a Premier League medal. So I'm sure they'll have one eye on that. But I mean, from Jurgen Klopp's perspective, I mean, we heard him in his press conference today saying he's not going to be, giving out medals to people who don't deserve them, but certainly he picked out those 3 as being ones who, even if they don't get their 5 appearances, their performances in training, their attitude, the way that they go about the game is absolutely superb. And that's certainly something that I've seen. Well, I've been watching Curtis Jones for a long time. I think obviously burst onto the scene with the brilliant goal against Everton. He's such a confident player. He's somebody who, even though he's a teenager, he's somebody who you could put into a Liverpool team in a similar way that Phil Foden plays for Manchester City alongside all of those stars. You could put him in this Liverpool team against probably 14 out of the Premier League teams, and Liverpool would be absolutely fine and wouldn't really notice too much of a difference. So I think he's, Adam Lallana, we know he's going to leave this summer. I think he is essentially Adam Lallana's replacement in the squad next season. I think he's going to be the one who we see coming off the bench, maybe when Liverpool are playing some of the lesser teams or they're playing certainly at Anfield. So yeah, I'd expect to see a lot more of him. I think Nico Williams as well. He does, you don't want to make the comparison because it's completely unfair on him, but he does remind you whenever you see him of Trent Alexander-Arnold. So you can sort of see the similarities. Both of them used to play in midfield, played on the right wing and have been moved back to fullback. And I suppose you can sort of see that in the way that they both play football. So again, Nathaniel Klein, an experienced Liverpool player, is moving on this summer. Nico Williams is going to be the replacement for him, essentially. He's going to be the one. We've seen Jordan Henderson and James Milner both play at right back at times this season for Liverpool when Trent has been missing, but I don't think that's going to have to be the case in future because Nico has got a huge future ahead of him. So I think we'll see a fair bit of him. And Harvey Elliott as well. I think, he's similarly as talented as the other two. He's just a couple of years younger. He's only just turned 17. So I don't think we can expect to see as much of him, but I think he'll get a couple of appearances off the bench. I think again, we'll see a little bit more of him next season. I wouldn't imagine he'll go out on loan. I think he'll continue to do what he has been doing and see where we go from there. But with him, he's got a couple of seasons on his side really before any sort of pressure comes onto him to start showing stuff regularly. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with him. But certainly, I wouldn't expect him to go out on loan. And the final one, Keanu Hoover. You mentioned him. I think he's absolutely brilliant. He sort of played right back for the last couple of years. I think long term he's going to be a centre back. I think he's sort of been forced into that almost with Nico Williams' emergence. I don't think he's quite at the level. I think he was ahead of Williams in terms of his progression, but Williams has now sort of overtook him, and I think Hoover will sort of become almost the fourth centre back for Liverpool. I mean, when Roma were interested in Dejan Lovren last summer, Jurgen Klopp was happy for Lovren to go and sell him purely because he thought that Hoover was ready to step in and be that fourth choice centre back. So it wouldn't massively surprise me if next season that was the case. If Liverpool got an offer and Lovren wanted to go, maybe that would happen. Certainly the summer after Lovren's contract expires, I wouldn't expect Liverpool to go out and buy anyone because they've got Hoover there and ready. Yasser Larouci you mentioned as well. I'm not 100% convinced on him at this moment in time. I think defensively he's got a little bit more to sort of learn, and Jurgen Klopp, even when Andy Robertson hasn't quite been ready, he's been a little bit reluctant. He'd rather put James Milner there, which I'm not a huge fan of because you know exactly what he's going to do when he gets the ball. He's going to turn back onto his right foot, and he's very predictable compared to Andy Robertson. But yeah, Yasser Larouci is a talent, but whether he makes it at Liverpool long term, I'm not too sure. But certainly the other four that I mentioned there, plus one or two others we've seen, Leighton Clarkson, Jake Kane, who you probably saw play against Shrewsbury in the FA Cup at Anfield. The two midfielders, they're both training with the first team, and Liverpool have got high hopes for them. But yeah, there's plenty of players coming through the system, and we sort of we like to get excited about players, and you sort of have to sort of temper the enthusiasm for some of them sometimes, and not get too far ahead of yourself. But at the same time, I think, Harvey Elliott, for example, he played for Fulham at the age of 16. He's such a talented player, and speaking to people around him, they've got no doubt that his feet are on the ground, his head's in the right place, and you only have to watch him play football. It's, I always say, when you watch Harvey Elliott play football, it's very easy to forget how young he is, because he just looks like a Liverpool player.
I mean, you mentioned so many youngsters there. Obviously, you touched on Lovren. Perhaps maybe this summer is the time where the best defender in the world will seek another challenge. And obviously, Hoover there is probably good at cleaning up the danger if he does come in as a fourth choice for that position. But I want both your opinions. We'll go with James first on this one, actually, because I touched on it before. With Williams coming in at right back and looking almost Trent Alexander-Arnold-esque, even though we shouldn't say that he does, but we are doing. So he's looking like the part in this Liverpool team. One criticism, if there is a legitimacy in it, with Liverpool's midfield is a lack of creativity, maybe. And obviously Trent Alexander-Arnold used to play midfield. And I've always been a fan of this, particularly for the national team, actually, where, we've got about, in England have Kyle Walker, Reece James, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Kieran Trippier, and I've missed one. They've got 5 good options in the England team. Now, Liverpool are a club that like to be clever with money and like to be clever with what they do. Could it be, James, a possibility that they say, right, we're going to be careful, we're going to be cautious with Williams, but we're going to look to put our trust in him as a potential right back, with the view to putting Alexander-Arnold as an 8? In a similar way to how Manchester City have Kevin De Bruyne anchoring things from midfield. I see a lot, to me, it might be a lazy comparison, but almost a Kevin De Bruyne at right back. This guy, not quite as two-footed as De Bruyne, but he's a good passer, he's confident on the ball, he's got a good shot, and less two-footed, as we say, but he has what I call the swaz with the pass. So, you see Kevin De Bruyne do bending passes, you think, oh my God, not many players could do that. And Trent Alexander-Arnold can do those passes, maybe not quite as regularly as Kevin De Bruyne. Do you see an 8 in Kevin De Bruyne? Do you see a midfield 8 or 6?
I definitely see a midfielder in Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's got everything. He's like almost a complete footballer in many ways. He's exceptional. And I think when you've got the guy coming in behind him, what you can do is slowly integrate him into the team, give him experiences, give him starts, and as he starts, and the same with Trent in midfield. I mean, there is a balance there. Like, do you lose something if Trent Alexander-Arnold is not playing right back? Do you, as opposed to what do you gain by him being in midfield? And so that's really up to Jurgen Klopp. And I definitely don't rule it out, because he could play there. He can easily play there, and there's no question about it. He's got the complete game. So it's about what Klopp wants to do, and whether he wants to utilise what he has, and how this guy develops. And if he develops as Matt is saying that he could, then there's every possibility he could play right back, perform really well, be a top class right back. Trent Alexander-Arnold can move into midfield and be a brilliant playmaker. That's not out of the realms of possibility. And Jurgen Klopp is very good at developing players, and he's quite willing to put players in positions that they haven't played often and move players around. Like you're saying with Henderson and Milner, who've both played fullback. So yeah, I'm not saying he'd do it every game, but I'm sure we'll see it at some point. It's just a matter of how the other guy develops, I guess.
I mean, the two things I sort of see with it is the alternative is at Manchester City, Pep Guardiola likes 2 players per position, so Cancelo, Walker, etc. I mean, there is the other idea that Liverpool can say, well, we've got squad depth now, so Trent Alexander-Arnold can play 2 out of 3 games, Williams can play 1, and then you've got sort of a bit
that too,
you've got that squad depth. But for me, and I'll throw this back to Matt, I think, to me, I see, a player of Kevin De Bruyne for me is probably worth in old money, I know we're in the recession period now. If we go back to transfer valuations 12 months ago, I think you'd be paying 200 million for Kevin De Bruyne. I think he's just unbelievable and that good. And something I think Roberto Martinez said he's the best player in the world now, and you might say he is, with Messi in decline and Ronaldo. Well, Messi not in obvious decline, but not quite. I think of his powers, and Ronaldo steadily declining as well. Could Trent Alexander-Arnold? Well, first of all, do you think the sensible option is just to say we've got more squad depth now, we've got 2 players who can play in this position, competition for places, or do you think you could look at it and say, well, we put Alexander-Arnold as a number 8, we're saving ourselves £150 million trying to get something similar on the transfer market?
I think on the sort of topic of squad depth, Liverpool don't really approach it in the same way that Pep Guardiola does. So Jurgen Klopp likes to work with a small group of players. He's never made any secret of that. And I think sort of versatility of his players, I think that one of the big attractions of James Milner is that he can play in midfield. He can play at left and right back as well. And I think that's sort of the ideal Jurgen Klopp player, really, is not somebody who just plays in one position. I think the big reason that they signed Takumi Minamino, for example, is that he can play wide left, wide right, through the middle. He can play as a midfielder. You know, Jurgen Klopp likes to have these players that can play in a variety of different roles, so that if there are injuries, if he needs to rotate, you know, he can do that without necessarily having someone like João Cancelo, for example, sat on the bench every week, earning in excess of 100,000 a week, you know, not really doing anything to deserve that. So in terms of the squad depth, I don't think it'll come too much into his thinking. I think there's no doubt about it. Trent Alexander-Arnold could play in midfield. I think that the comparison to Kevin De Bruyne is absolutely right. I think those two, in terms of deliveries into the box, those two are the closest thing to David Beckham that you get. I think, you know, Trent can go on and do whatever he wants in the game. I think, what is he, 21 still, which is absolutely crazy. My guess would be that Trent will stay at right back for as long as Jurgen Klopp is at Liverpool. I think maybe under a new manager in, you know, what will it be, 4 years' time, if Jurgen Klopp was to move on, somebody else was to come in with a slightly different idea and a slightly different way of thinking, then maybe you could have that move when Trent will still only be 25. You know, he'd still have his peak years ahead of him. But for me, Liverpool probably have got the best right back in football at the moment in Trent Alexander-Arnold. So why would you then move him and try and get something else out of him when the focal point, as we say, you know, Liverpool's number 10s, if you like, are their fullbacks? It's almost the crucial position under Jurgen Klopp. The relationship that he has with Mohamed Salah, I just don't think at this moment in time it makes too much sense to move him, because you would then alter the dynamic for the rest of the team as well.
What about for England?
Potentially for England, it could be something that Gareth Southgate tries. I mean, he's got, as you say, a lot of options at fullback. But again, I think Trent is the best right back that England have. And I think it would be, I know it's harsh to sort of put him ahead of players like Wan-Bissaka or Kieran Trippier, because they're both excellent players in their own right. But I think, you know, England have got enough in midfield to play their best right back in his best position. And I think for Gareth Southgate, he's always one who has said, you know, he won't pick players for the national team unless they're playing regular football and they're getting minutes. I think the same sort of thing might apply in that they have to be playing regular minutes in the same position that he plays them in. So for Trent to be playing right back week in, week out for Liverpool, but then every few months going to England and playing in midfield, I'm not sure how comfortable Gareth Southgate would be with that.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say with that is Walker did play a whole tournament at centre back, didn't he? As opposed to right back for Man City. But yeah, no, point taken. I mean, obviously, James, you're a big fan of Reece James, and you think that you actually said that he'll be better than Alexander-Arnold, which I said at the time was quite a statement.
Did I say that? I think he can get to that level. I really do. I've been watching him for a long time.
Yeah.
He had injuries this season as well. It's his first season at this level, but he is one of the best crossers of the ball that I've ever seen.
Best understudy right back of anyone in the league. I mean,
and again, he's like Trent Alexander-Arnold in that he can play midfield. Like last year at Wigan, he played half their season at right back and was brilliant. and then played half the season in midfield and was brilliant. And he got their Player of the Year and was voted as, I think, some of their fans voted him as Wigan's best ever player in their history. So, and yeah, he's had a bit of injuries. His first season at Premier League level this year. I think in the next couple of years, as he starts to develop, you'll start to see how good he is. But yeah, I mean, I'm not. Fernando Alderweireld is a world-class player. I mean, I'm not. Let's not make any bones about that. Reece James has got a fight in his hands if he wants to get into the England team at the right back position. But again, I mean, he could play in midfield for England. There's no doubt about that. I have total confidence he could do that. Yeah. So. It's good for England, but we've got a load of great fullbacks. Right
it is.
And that's a really good thing.
Not many good left backs though. It's all on the right hand side. No disrespect to Chilwell and Shaw there, but the others are. I mean, amazing depth. Obviously, no, Chilwell and Shaw are decent options as well. But actually, the question that came in from someone who me and Matt both know, and he asked me to ask you, and I'll ask you as well, James. He's also predicted an answer. What is the what do you both think? We'll start with James so we can build tension. Who is the better team, do you think, as an overall package? Is it the Invincibles, Arsenal Invincibles, or this Liverpool team now that could go on to a points? Points. I'm not going to answer this. But I got my own opinion.
Well, the Invincibles was a great team.
It was.
It didn't win the Champions League. Should have won the Champions League.
I think base it on the Premier League itself. I think that was the greatest.
Okay. All right. And that's a very difficult one.
Final question to end the podcast with.
Well, that is a very difficult one
for our loyal niche audience.
I mean, going unbeaten through a Premier League season, is an incredible achievement. Let's start with that. But Liverpool could potentially get a record points total. It could go well over 100. And just the way that they play football, the relentlessness, the winning mentality. But I mean, of those two teams, I think the more complete team is probably the Liverpool team, but it's very close.
Okay, so you're going with Liverpool.
But I mean, let's put it this way: Thierry Henry would get into this Liverpool team. I mean, Patrick Vieira would get into this Liverpool team. And Ashley Cole would run Andy Robertson very close. I mean, I think Ashley Cole's the best left back we've seen in the Premier League. But so it's a difficult question, because the Invincibles was a great side as well. I think it's just the points total and the fact that Liverpool's team is such a team unit. There's such a. It's the sum of its parts. It's not built around one individual. It's a team, and I know we're just judging on the Premier League, but this team has won the Champions League as well. That's another thing. It's not just won the Premier League. It's won the Champions League. It's won the Super Cup. It's won the World Club Cup. And I know that we're not counting that as part of the question, but I can't help but think about that as well. That this team have done it. They've got 190. They're going to get around 200 points in 2 seasons in the Premier League alone.
10 seconds, James. What's your answer now?
It's difficult, but I'm going to say Liverpool, but it's very marginal. It's very close out of those two.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I know who asked that question. I also know that we're pretty much the same age, and neither of us can remember the Arsenal's Invincible season. No. So it's very difficult for me to...
Thank you, James. Thank you, James, for your insights there.
I do remember that season.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Look, there's no doubt about it. To go, unbeaten throughout an entire season, as Liverpool proved yesterday, I think, Arsenal wrapped that title up with a few games to go and managed to keep going and keep that sort of motivation and that sort of thing. But for me, you have to look at the points total. I think it was 12 draws that Arsenal had that season.
It's funny you should say that. This was also sent to me in a message that you would say 12 draws.
You can tell we have this conversation quite regularly in our little group chat. But I think, look, the way that you look at a league table and decide who the best team is by how many points they put on the board. And for me, Liverpool are going to get more than 100 points. You know, I'm backing Liverpool to beat Manchester City's record. I actually, I know this isn't the question, but I actually think that the Manchester City team of the last 2 seasons, which got 100 points and then 98 points, I think both of those Manchester City teams are better than this Arsenal's Invincibles team.
I thought you were going to say better than Liverpool. So I was going to.
I agree. I agree with you, Matt. Yeah,
because to get that number of points, it is just utterly ridiculous. I think Liverpool. You could even extend it to last season. Liverpool's 97-point team. I think even though they didn't win the league, I think they were probably a better team than the Arsenal Invincibles team. But that's not to take anything away from what Arsenal did. It's a ridiculous achievement. It's something that it would have been nice to see Liverpool go the season unbeaten. That obviously hasn't happened. But look, for me, the way that you work out who the best team is by how many points they get. And Liverpool have already surpassed what Arsenal did with 6 games to go.
No, I actually agree with you both unanimously, but I thought it'd be interesting because I did get asked the question. And I'm also apparently a Liverpool fan at times, but I'm not. I just disagree with certain conspiracy theories. Yeah, I mean, Matt, I think we'll give you the final word as special guest on said podcast. Is there what would yours, if you could summarise this season in, I don't know, 30 seconds, how would you do it?
Oh wow, what a task that is! I mean, there's been so many games actually where I regularly get asked the question, what was the moment when you thought Liverpool had won the league, and when was the time that you thought it was possible? And it's an impossible question to say just one match, but I think the game that best sums up this Liverpool team was Leicester City on Boxing Day. I think the sort of perfection of that performance to go to a team which realistically we're in the title race for a few months of this season. People were talking about them potentially challenging. I think it would be a massive shame if they ended up missing out on the Champions League, because I think what Brendan Rodgers has done there with a fantastic team is brilliant. But Liverpool went to Leicester on Boxing Day in the prime time slot, just put on such a performance, absolutely wiped the floor with them. I don't think we've seen as perfect a performance as that for a long time, not just from Liverpool, but from any team to go and perform as well as they did. I think that sums up just how brilliant this Liverpool team are. And, it's not like that every week, as we say. There's certain moments, the Aston Villa game, for example, where Liverpool had to dig in and leave it late. But yeah, I think that best sums up the brilliance of this Liverpool team. And even the most hardened Everton or Manchester United fans or whatever would have to admit that Liverpool are worthy title winners. And yeah, for me, that Leicester game was such a privilege to watch it. Obviously, as someone who covers Liverpool regularly, it was amazing. It was utterly ridiculous how Liverpool played that day. And every single player, I know I'm going on a little bit here, but Trent Alexander-Arnold on that day, I mean, imagine being him, being in this Liverpool team, performing to that level. It's an absolute dream to watch. And hopefully, for someone who covers Liverpool regularly, hopefully that continues.
It was a touch over 30 seconds, but again, you were very eloquent with the with the description. And you do mention the most ardent Everton fans. You would be surprised. Some people are not too pleased still, or accepting of Liverpool's wonderful successes. It's not just that person. There's a few others who messaged me about it.
I can probably guess who they are as well.
You can probably guess who they are as well. But I won't say on the podcast what they've said because that would be inappropriate to me. But anyway, yeah. So that was a lovely, well summarised point, Matt. Thank you, James, as well for turning up again and dealing with me. And yeah, I mean that should go up on that should be on iTunes, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and if my pet project is going through to Wayne, it should also be on YouTube. But depends on your outlook on how you want to watch it. But yeah, from all of us, peace out and see you next week.